Maya stood at the bottom of the tall glass building, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The city around her buzzed with morning life, cars honking, people rushing, the chatter of footsteps across the busy street. But for Maya, all of it faded into silence as she looked up at the tower. It wasn't just any building. It was the headquarters of one of the most powerful companies in the country, a place where thousands of young people dreamed of working but only a few were chosen. Today was her chance, maybe her only chance. She clutched a folder in her hands, the corners already damp from her nervous grip. Inside were her certificates, her recommendations, and the resume she had rewritten 100 times. Everything seemed ready, except for one thing, her feet. She had no shoes. The security guard at the front noticed her immediately. His eyebrows rose, and he leaned slightly forward as if to confirm what he was seeing. Maya's steps were slow as she moved across the marble entrance, her bare feet pressing against the cool surface. The sound of her soles against the polished floor echoed in the wide hall, louder than it should have been, each step making her more aware of how exposed she was. People waiting in the lobby turned their heads. Some frowned, others exchanged amused looks, and a few chuckled under their breath. To them, it looked strange, maybe even foolish. Who would come to an interview barefoot? Maya felt their eyes burning into her, but she kept moving. Her head was lifted, though her hands shook. She wanted to disappear, but she knew she couldn't. She had already made it this far, and there was no turning back. She whispered inside her head, "Just keep walking, just keep breathing." The sliding doors of the elevator opened with a soft ding, and she stepped inside. For a moment she was alone, surrounded by mirrored walls reflecting her worried face. She caught sight of herself, and almost laughed bitterly. Her hair was tied neatly, her clothes were clean though not expensive, and her folder was held tightly as though it was her lifeline. She looked prepared, until her gaze dropped to her bare feet. Suddenly the mirror seemed cruel, throwing back the image of someone who didn't belong in this world of polished shoes and sharp suits. The elevator climbed slowly, and with each floor that passed, Maya's heart sank deeper. She thought of the people she would face in a few minutes. The panel of interviewers in crisp suits, with sharp eyes that measured every detail. She imagined their reaction the moment she walked in. They would see her feet first, not her face, not her words, not her worth. Just her feet, uncovered and strange in a place where image mattered more than truth. She clenched her jaw. She knew why she was barefoot, but would they even care to listen? The doors opened, and Maya stepped out into another wide hallway. There were more people here, all dressed with care, sitting on chairs lined against the wall. These were the other candidates. Men in iron shirts, women in heels that clicked against the floor, all holding folders like hers. They looked at her as she passed. Some raised their eyebrows, others smirked. One young man even let out a short laugh before covering his mouth. Maya felt her face heat up, but she walked on, her steps steady though her legs trembled inside. She chose a seat at the far end of the row, away from their whispers. As she sat, she felt the cold floor under her toes, reminding her with every second of what she had done. The receptionist at the desk looked at her, confusion flashing in her eyes before she leaned toward another employee and whispered something. The two of them glanced at Maya, trying to be discreet but failing. Maya could sense it, the silent storm of judgment around her. Yet she kept her folder on her lap, opened it, and stared at her papers as if they were a shield. She knew she looked out of place. She knew the whispers would only grow once she entered the interview room. But what else could she do? Time moved slowly. Every second stretched, filling the air with tension. One by one, candidates were called into the interview room, disappearing through the heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. Some returned with forced smiles, others with defeated faces, their shoulders slumped. Maya tried to breathe deeply, reminding herself of the reason she was here, the reason she couldn't let fear win. But deep inside, doubt kept whispering cruel words. They will laugh at you. They won't take you seriously. You've already lost. She shut her eyes for a moment, holding the folder tighter. She thought of her mother, who had worked long nights so Maya could finish her studies. She thought of her younger brother, who looked up to her as if she could change their whole life. She thought of the little voice inside her that always said, "Don't give up, no matter what." And then she thought of the child she had seen earlier, the one whose pain had made her forget her own future for a moment. That choice still echoed in her chest. Maybe it had been foolish, maybe it had been reckless, but she couldn't regret it. The receptionist finally called her name. Maya stood. All eyes turned again. She walked barefoot across the hall, her head held higher this time, though her stomach twisted with fear. The wooden door loomed closer. Behind it waited the people who would decide her fate. She didn't know if she would leave this building with a job or with nothing but embarrassment. But as her hand touched the door handle, one thing was clear. This was a moment that would change her life forever, in one way or another. The door opened slowly, and Maya stepped inside. The room was larger than she had imagined. A long wooden table stretched across the center, polished until it shone under the bright lights. At the far end sat a group of people in suits, their faces serious, their eyes sharp. Papers, laptops, and glasses of water were placed neatly in front of them. The air was heavy, the kind of air that made every sound seem louder, every move seem bigger. Maya felt all their eyes drop to the floor first. She didn't need a mirror to know what they were looking at. Her bare feet touched the soft carpet, and the silence stretched. The CEO himself sat in the middle, a man in his 50s with silver hair and calm, unreadable eyes. He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. He simply studied her as she walked toward the single chair placed in front of the table. The chair felt too small, almost like it had been designed to make candidates feel weaker. Maya sat down carefully, her folder balanced on her lap, her hands pressed tightly against it to stop the shaking. For a moment, no one spoke. The panel just looked at her, exchanging small glances with one another. Maya's heart raced. She wanted them to begin, to ask something, anything, to break the silence that seemed to trap her. Finally, one of the interviewers, a woman with sharp glasses and an even sharper voice, leaned forward. "Miss Maya," she said slowly, "before we begin with your qualifications, there is something we must ask." Her eyes lowered again to Maya's feet. The others followed. Maya's throat tightened. The woman continued, "Why are you not wearing shoes?" The question dropped into the air like a stone into still water. The ripples of tension spread immediately. One man raised his eyebrows, another scribbled something quickly on his notepad. Maya's chest burned. She had known this question would come, but now that it was here, she couldn't find her voice. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She closed it again, swallowing hard. Her hands gripped the folder until the edges dug into her palms. The CEO spoke then, his voice deep but calm. "Yes, Maya. We are curious. First impressions matter in business. So please, explain. Why barefoot?" His tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was steady, like a test, like he wanted to see not only her answer but the way she gave it. Maya took a breath. Her eyes darted around the table. She could see doubt on their faces. She could almost hear their thoughts. Unprofessional. Careless. Unprepared. She felt a wave of shame, but then another wave rose inside her, one made of stubborn courage. She lifted her chin slightly and said, her voice soft but clear, "I gave my shoes away." The words seemed to puzzle them. A murmur of confusion passed among the panel members. One man leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You gave them away," he repeated, disbelief dripping from his voice. "To whom? And why would you do that on the day of an important interview?" Maya hesitated again. The memory flashed in her mind, the little boy sitting on the cold pavement near the train station, his small feet dirty, his face pale with hunger and pain. She had seen him shivering, clutching his knees, his soles cracked and bleeding. Without thinking, she had bent down, removed her shoes, and placed them on his feet. His wide eyes had filled with tears, and he had whispered a thank you so soft she almost didn't hear it. Then she had walked away, the ground biting at her bare feet, but her heart strangely light despite the fear that followed. Her voice trembled, but she spoke. There was a child outside the station. He had no shoes. He looked hurt. I couldn't ignore him. So I gave him mine. She paused, her eyes falling for a moment. I know it may seem foolish, especially today. But at that moment, I couldn't walk past and pretend I didn't see. The room fell into another silence, but it was different from before. This silence was heavier, filled with surprise and judgment mixed together. One of the panel members, an older man with a stern face, shook his head slowly. "That was irresponsible," he said firmly. "Do you realize what kind of impression you are giving? If you cannot balance emotion and logic in your personal life, how can you do it in this company?" Another interviewer, a younger woman with a cold smile, added, "We value discipline, not impulsive acts. Helping people is good, but there is a time and place for everything. Sacrificing your chance here for a stranger shows poor judgment." Her words cut sharply, making Maya's chest ache. She wanted to defend herself, but she struggled to find the right words. Her lips parted, and she whispered, "Sometimes, the right choice doesn't look logical at first. Sometimes, it's about doing what feels human." Her voice cracked slightly, and she quickly looked down, embarrassed. The panel shifted uncomfortably. Some shook their heads, others scribbled notes. The tension in the room climbed higher. Maya's heart pounded as if it would burst. Was she ruining everything? Was her one chance slipping away in front of her eyes? And yet, through it all, the CEO remained silent. He didn't interrupt, didn't scold, didn't even nod. He just watched her, his chin resting lightly on his hand, his eyes locked on hers. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. But his silence was more powerful than all the harsh words thrown at her. It made the air in the room feel even heavier, as if something unexpected was about to happen. Maya sat frozen, her palms sweaty, her heart filled with both fear and defiance. She didn't know what the CEO would say next. She didn't know if her story would save her or destroy her. All she knew was that the most important test of her life had only just begun. The room was so quiet that Maya could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock above the door. The sharp words of the panel still echoed in her ears, but it was the silence of the CEO that weighed heaviest on her shoulders. He hadn't spoken since asking his question. He just studied her, his eyes calm but unreadable, as though he was trying to look past her appearance, past her words, into something deeper. Finally, the CEO leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "Tell us exactly what happened," he said, his voice slow and deliberate. "Don't leave anything out. Why did you give your shoes away? And why didn't you think to replace them before coming here?" His tone wasn't angry. It was steady, like a judge asking for the truth. Maya's throat tightened. She could feel every eye fixed on her, some cold, some curious, others already dismissive. Her fingers dug into the folder in her lap, but she lifted her gaze and spoke. "I was on my way to the station this morning. I was early, I wanted to make sure nothing went wrong. But as I walked past the corner, I saw a boy. He was no older than 8. He was sitting on the pavement, hugging his knees. His feet were bare, covered in dirt, and I could see cuts, real cuts, bleeding on the soles. He looked at me." Her voice shook and she paused, swallowing hard. "He looked at me like he was invisible. Like nobody in the world could see him." One of the panel members shifted impatiently. "And so you gave him your shoes?" "Yes," Maya said, her voice stronger now. "I didn't think about it. I didn't plan it. I just did it. I knelt down, took off my shoes, and put them on his feet. They were too big for him, but it was better than nothing. He looked at me, and his eyes filled with tears. He whispered, 'Thank you.'" Her eyes dropped for a moment, remembering the boy's face. Then she looked back up. "After that, I walked here barefoot. I knew people would stare, I knew it might cost me everything. But I couldn't regret it. Not when I saw the way that boy smiled for the first time." The panel was silent again. Some avoided her eyes, others scribbled on their papers with hurried strokes. One man cleared his throat and said firmly, Compassion is admirable, Miss Maya, but this is a company. We make decisions with logic and strategy, not emotions. Walking barefoot into an interview is not bravery. It is a mistake. The woman with glasses adjusted them sharply and added, "Exactly. You may think your act was noble, but to us, it shows you are careless. You prioritized a stranger over your own future. How can we trust you to prioritize this company if you don't even prioritize yourself?" Maya's stomach sank. Each word felt like a stone thrown at her, pushing her deeper into doubt. But something inside her refused to stay silent. She sat up straighter, her hands no longer shaking. "I understand what you're saying," she replied softly. "But I don't see it that way. Sometimes the smallest actions can mean the most." To that boy, it wasn't just shoes. It was proof that someone cared. That he wasn't invisible. "And if I had walked away, pretending not to see, then maybe I would have looked more professional here. But I would have betrayed myself." Her words hung in the air. For the first time, there was no quick response from the panel. They shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her eyes. The silence was heavy, almost awkward. Only the CEO remained completely still, his eyes never leaving hers. Then one of the younger interviewers, trying to break the tension, gave a short laugh. "Idealism," he muttered. "We've seen this before. Young candidates thinking compassion will keep a company alive. The truth is, this world runs on results. Good intentions don't pay salaries." Maya turned to him, her voice firmer now. "Maybe not. But people do. Companies are built on people. And people are more than numbers. If we forget that, then we may succeed for a while, but in the long run, we will lose everything." The panel looked shocked at her courage. A candidate talking back wasn't common, especially one already under pressure. Whispers passed between them, but still the CEO said nothing. He leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable, and the silence grew thicker. Finally, the older man at the table scoffed. "I think we've heard enough. She is not fit for this role." His words were sharp, almost final, like a gavel striking down. Another nodded in agreement. "Yes. She doesn't understand balance. She only understands impulse." Maya's chest tightened. Was this it? Was she about to be dismissed, thrown out before she even had the chance to prove her skills? Her fingers trembled, but she gripped her folder tighter, as though it was her last anchor. She wanted to scream, to beg them to understand, but her throat was dry. Then, at last, the CEO moved. He raised his hand slightly, and the room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. He leaned forward again, his gaze locked on Maya. "Interesting," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then louder, so the room could hear. "Everyone here has judged her already. But I am not done listening." The panel shifted, confused. The CEO's expression remained calm, but there was a spark in his eyes now, a spark no one could read. Maya's breath caught in her chest. Something was about to change, she could feel it. The question was, would it save her, or break her completely? The air in the room felt heavier after the CEO's words. Maya sat on the edge of her chair, her heart thumping, her hands gripping her folder so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She could sense a shift. Some panel members looked uneasy, as if the CEO's interest in her Barefoot story had unsettled them. Others looked irritated, their pride pricked by his refusal to end the interview. The older man with the stern face was the first to push back. His voice was sharp, his tone filled with irritation. "Sir, with all respect, this is not a story we need to waste more time on. This candidate has already shown she lacks the sense of responsibility required for this company. Walking into an interview barefoot is not only unprofessional, it is disrespectful." He glanced at Maya, his eyes cold. What kind of example would she set if she cannot even present herself properly? Another panel member, the woman with sharp glasses, leaned forward, adjusting her pen between her fingers. "I agree," she said crisply. "Yes, compassion has its place, but business is about discipline. Miss Maya, she turned her eyes to her. Do you realize how many people would give anything for this interview? Do you realize how careless you appear by choosing to come here in this state? You speak of humanity, but where is your respect for the opportunity you were given? Maya felt her throat tighten. Their words hit her like stones, each one heavier than the last. She wanted to defend herself, to explain again, but she also knew repeating her story would sound like an excuse. Her eyes fell to the folder in her lap. All the certificates, all the late nights of study, all the sacrifices her family had made, were they going to be reduced to nothing because of one Barefoot choice? Another younger man on the panel gave a mocking chuckle. You talk about values, about people, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. But values don't win contracts. Values don't keep this company running. Do you think a client will care that you gave away your shoes? No, they will laugh, just as we are now. You risked your career for a stranger. That may sound noble to you, but in reality, it is weakness. Maya's face flushed hot. Weakness. The word echoed inside her chest. For a moment, doubt clawed at her, whispering that maybe they were right, maybe she had been foolish. Maybe she didn't belong here after all. She gripped the folder tighter, trying to steady her breathing. But something inside her refused to let go. She lifted her head slowly, her voice trembling but clear. I don't believe compassion is weakness, she said softly. I don't believe caring for someone makes you less capable. If anything, it gives you strength. You may see it as foolish, but I see it as the kind of choice that defines who you are. The woman with glasses scoffed loudly. Big words, Miss Maya. But words are easy. Results are what matter. The older man leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. Tell us then, what results came from your choice this morning? Did helping that boy put food on his table? Did it put clothes on his back? Or did it just leave you barefoot and unprepared? Sometimes, the world punishes those who act on impulse. And right now, you are being punished. Maya swallowed hard. His words were cruel, but they were not entirely wrong. The boy's life was still hard, still uncertain. Her shoes wouldn't fix everything. But she couldn't regret it, not when she remembered his eyes. She met the older man's gaze and whispered, even if it only gave him one moment of hope, then it was worth it. The panel erupted in whispers, shaking their heads, scribbling notes. Their disapproval was clear, and the weight of it pressed on Maya's shoulders. Her hands trembled again, but this time she didn't lower her gaze. She forced herself to hold her head high, even as her stomach twisted in fear. Through it all, the CEO remained silent. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers resting against his chin, his expression unreadable. Every so often, his eyes flicked toward the panel members, but he never interrupted them. It was as if he was letting the storm rage on, watching closely to see how Maya would withstand it. Finally, after what felt like hours, one of the younger women on the panel sighed and said, I think we've wasted enough time. She does not belong here. Let us move to the next candidate. She gathered her papers as though the matter was settled. Maya's heart sank. This was it. This was the end. She had fought, but it wasn't enough. Her one chance was slipping through her fingers. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, she thought she would break. But then, the CEO moved. He lifted his hand, and the room fell silent instantly. All eyes turned to him, waiting. He leaned forward slowly, his eyes still locked on Maya. His voice was calm, steady, but carried weight that silenced every whisper. Enough, he said simply. The word echoed in the air, stronger than all the criticism that had come before. The panel froze. The older man leaned back reluctantly, the woman with glasses pursed her lips, the others exchanged uncertain glances. No one dared to argue further. The CEO's gaze remained on Maya. For a long moment, he said nothing, letting the silence stretch until it almost broke her. Then, finally, he spoke. You call it weakness, he said, glancing briefly at the panel before turning back to her. But I see something different. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Maya's breath caught in her chest. Something was shifting. Something she hadn't expected. The entire room leaned forward slightly, waiting. Whatever the CEO was about to say next would decide everything. The air in the room seemed to hold its breath. Maya sat frozen, her chest tight, her hands gripping her folder so hard it hurt. She had braced herself for rejection, for the final blow that would send her out of the building barefoot and humiliated. But instead, the CEO's words lingered in the silence like a riddle. You call it weakness. But I see something different. The panel members shifted in their seats. Some frowned, others avoided his gaze, unsure whether to challenge him or stay quiet. The older man with the stern face cleared his throat and said cautiously, "Sir, with all respect, what do you mean by that? This candidate has broken every rule of professionalism. Are we truly going to overlook that because of a story?" The CEO didn't look at him. His eyes were still locked on Maya, steady and unreadable. "Rules are important," he said calmly. "But rules are not everything. Sometimes, the truest test of a person comes when rules are broken." "I want to hear more from her." Maya's breath hitched. She didn't expect this. After all the harsh criticism, after all the scorn, she hadn't imagined the CEO himself would defend her. Her voice trembled when she spoke, almost a whisper. "Sir." She paused, gathering strength. "I know I must look unprepared. I know I don't look like the perfect candidate. But I am not careless. I care too much. Maybe too much, some would say. But I believe caring is what makes someone truly strong." The CEO leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. He studied her for a long moment, and then he nodded slightly. "Tell me," he said softly, "why did you not simply walk away? No one would have blamed you. Everyone walks past suffering every day." Maya swallowed. Her voice steadied as she answered. "Because walking away would have haunted me. I would have carried it with me here, in this room. I could not have answered your questions with honesty, knowing I had chosen comfort over kindness. Maybe the boy will forget me tomorrow. Maybe the shoes won't last long. But in that moment, I gave what I could. And sometimes, all a person needs is one act of kindness to believe they matter." The CEO's lips curved ever so slightly, not a smile, but the faint trace of one. He tapped his fingers lightly against the table. "Interesting," he murmured. The panel, however, wasn't satisfied. The woman with sharp glasses leaned forward, her voice edged with frustration. "Sir, you cannot be serious. With respect, you're letting emotions cloud judgment. If we start rewarding impulsive decisions, we risk setting the wrong example. Imagine if every employee acted on feelings instead of logic." The younger man added quickly, "This company has built its reputation on discipline, not charity. We can't hire someone who might put strangers above our clients." The CEO turned his head slowly toward them, and his calm gaze silenced them. "Discipline is vital," he said firmly. "But compassion is rarer. We can train skills, we can teach strategy, but we cannot teach heart. A person either has it, or they don't. And what I see in her," he nodded toward Maya, "is heart." The room froze. Gasps of disbelief filled the air. Some panel members looked stunned, others openly angry. The older man spoke again, his tone sharp. "Sir, are you saying you would actually consider her? After this display?" The CEO's eyes narrowed slightly. His voice grew firmer, each word cutting through the air. "Not consider. I have decided. She is exactly the kind of person we need." Maya's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. Her hands trembled against the folder, and she felt her throat tighten with tears she struggled to hold back. The panel erupted in whispers and protests. "This is irregular," one of them exclaimed. "We have procedures, standards." Another muttered angrily, "We can't hire someone just because of a sob story." The room buzzed with disapproval, but the CEO lifted his hand, and the noise died instantly. His authority was absolute. He leaned forward again, his gaze sweeping across the table. "I have listened to all of you," he said. "And I respect your concerns. But let me remind you, what we are building here is not just a company. It is a legacy. A place that lasts beyond profits and contracts. And legacies are not built by people who play it safe. They are built by people who dare to act with courage. Today, this young woman dared. While the rest of us would have walked past, she stopped. That tells me more about her leadership than any degree or certificate ever could." The panel fell silent. No one dared to challenge him again. His words carried the weight of finality, of a decision that could not be undone. Maya sat there, stunned. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Tears blurred her vision as she tried to process what was happening. She had walked into this room ready for humiliation, ready for rejection. And yet, against all odds, the one man who mattered most had seen her. Not her bare feet, not her mistakes, but her heart. The CEO's gaze softened just slightly as he looked at her. "Miss Maya," he said, his voice steady, "if you are willing, I would like to offer you a place here. Not tomorrow, not after more interviews. Today. Right now." The words struck her like a lightning bolt. She blinked rapidly, unable to stop the tears now. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Yes, yes, sir. Thank you." The room was silent again, but this time for a different reason. Even those who disapproved sat frozen, unable to deny the weight of what had just happened. Something extraordinary had taken place, something no one in that room would forget. Maya sat straighter, her heart pounding not with fear but with a strange, powerful hope. She had walked into the room barefoot, laughed at and doubted. And now she was walking out with something no shoes could ever give her, the chance to change her life forever. The boardroom had never been so quiet. Every member sat with wide eyes as Maya finished her presentation, her voice steady, her story raw and powerful. She had spoken not only about numbers and plans but also about courage, about surviving without comfort, about walking barefoot into rooms where people laughed, yet still daring to speak. The CEO leaned back in his chair, studying her with a calm expression that revealed nothing, while the others exchanged nervous glances, as if waiting for him to speak. After what felt like forever, the CEO finally rose. He did not sit across the table anymore. He walked to Maya's side and placed her presentation papers down gently. His voice was low but carried across the entire room. "Maya, you came here without shoes, but you just walked farther than anyone else sitting in this room." The silence deepened, as if time itself paused. The board members frowned, confused, some even upset. A senior manager muttered under his breath, "She doesn't even fit the image of this company." But the CEO turned sharply and said, "That's exactly why she's needed. We don't need more polished shoes, we need people who have walked the hard road." Gasps filled the room, and Maya could feel her throat tighten. The CEO announced something no one expected. "I want to offer you the position, not as an assistant, but as a project leader. You will lead one of our new ventures." The room erupted. Some executives protested loudly, saying she was too young, too inexperienced, that it was reckless to put such responsibility in her hands. But the CEO raised a hand, silencing them. He then told Maya's story back to them, a girl who had come from nothing, who had lost almost everything, yet chose to stand here without shame, facing judgment with courage. "If this company only hires people who look the part, we'll never grow. But if we trust people who can rise above struggle, we'll change the future." Those words shook the board members. Some lowered their heads, ashamed of their earlier laughter. Maya stood frozen, hardly believing what she heard. She whispered, "Are you sure?" The CEO gave a rare smile. "I've never been more sure." At that moment, applause broke out, not from the board, but from the staff who had been listening outside the glass walls. They had gathered quietly, curious about the barefoot girl, and now they clapped with tears in their eyes. The echo of their hands filled the hallways. Maya blinked back tears, remembering the night she walked across broken ground with no shoes, the night she promised herself she would never give up no matter the pain. Now here she was, standing tall, being given a chance most only dreamed of. But with that offer came a heavy weight. She knew this was not just a job, it was a test of everything she believed in. Could she lead? Could she prove the CEO's faith was not a mistake? The questions swirled in her mind, but one thing was clear: this was the beginning of a new fight. And as she looked at the CEO, who stood firm against all opposition, she realized something even more shocking. This man was not only offering her a position, he was offering her a chance to change her life forever, and maybe even the lives of others who felt invisible. The room was still tense, full of people unsure of what would happen next, and Maya's heart pounded because she knew her answer would decide everything.